Today marks the 5th anniversary of the murder of George Floyd. Floyd, a black man, died when a white Minneapolis police officer held his knee on Floyd's neck for more than 9 minutes. Floyd's death prompted protests around the world, heightening awareness of the Black Lives Matter movement. But despite all of that advocacy, the U.S. Congress never passed any legislation aimed at reducing racial profiling or the use of force by police. Today, a memorial in his honor is taking place near Houston, Texas. And a short time ago, we heard from Reverend Al Sharpton, who delivered the eulogy at Floyd's funeral. Here's some of what Mr. Sharpton had to say.
Those 5 years later, they're still together and still doing what is right. Because George Floyd movement wasn't a fad. It was a movement that will go until we can see real institutional change. What Emmett Till was for one era, George Floyd has been for this time in history. He's buried to my right, and they did not even want, and rightfully so, to put his name on his burial site for fear that it would be vandalized like Emmett Till's were. But I will never forget, 5 years ago tomorrow, I got a call from Attorney Ben Crump, who I call the Attorney General of Black America. He called me and said, Reverend Al, he said, did you hear about what happened in Minneapolis? I said, I saw it on television. It was in the middle of a pandemic. We were all locked down, couldn't go anywhere, and just watched the news over and over again. And he said, the family would like to speak with you. And he connected Phalonis Floyd in, one of George's brothers, who's been carrying on with Keita and other members, Latoya, all of the families here, many of the family members. And he said they'd like you to go to Minneapolis and protest what happened, and also say that we are not a family that condone violence, because some people were burning stuff down. And the cousin and all said that I'll get the church in Houston, where she's a member. She wasn't just renting a church, she goes there. Some of y'all don't go to church till the funeral. It is Sunday, I had to do a little preaching. And I said, well, I don't know, Ben, let me try to get there, Phalonis. And all of the flights were down because it was the pandemic. And I called Robert Smith, a black billionaire, and he sent his plane to bring me to Minneapolis. And we did the rallies and the first funeral there. And then we came to North Carolina and then to Houston. Tyler Perry sent his jet to bring the family in from all over. In the middle of a pandemic, it's important that you know that people from all over, Black America, white America, all people came together to stand with this family. But I promised them that we would be there till the end. 5 years later, some people are missing, but I had to be here. And I'll be here as long as it takes to get justice restored. This week, we saw some change over the years. We did not get the George Floyd Justice Bill, but we got consent decrees in Minneapolis, where he was killed, and in Louisville, Kentucky, where Breonna Taylor was killed. This week, the Department of Justice under Donald Trump said they were going to end those dissent decrees, which is tantamount to the Department of Justice and the president spitting on the grave of George Floyd. To wait to the anniversary and announce this, knowing this family was going to be brought back to the brokenheartedness of what happened, shows the disregard and insensitivity of this administration. But the reason that We will not be deterred. As Trump was president when George Floyd happened, and he didn't do anything then. We made things happen, and we're gonna make them happen again.
That was Reverend Al Sharpton speaking at a memorial for George Floyd, who died almost 5 years ago in Minneapolis. Let's dig deeper into this story and invite to the show Cornell Brooks. He's a professor at the Harvard Kennedy School, as well as a former president and CEO of the NAACP. Professor Brooks, really good to see you. It's been a few years, sir. Nice to speak with you again.
Good to be with you.
Professor Brooks, first, let me say what I'm sure many people are thinking, which is I can't believe it's been 5 years. It feels like it was just a short time ago. Has much changed in these past 5 years?
First of all, let me agree with you. It's hard to believe that it's been 5 years. 5 years ago, I stood with hundreds and hundreds of students at the White House, where a number of them picked me up and pinned me against the fence so that we might address the crowd. So here we are 5 years later, and much has changed, but much has not changed at all. And what we mean by that is 5 years ago, we saw 26 million Americans take to the streets across 550 jurisdictions in the largest social justice protest in American history, millions more around the country. We saw corporation after corporation after corporation, law firm after law firm commit to address racial inequities. 5 years ago, many in this country and around the world declared it to be a moment of racial reckoning. In the present moment, we have a president, again, in the White House, who has, as Reverend Sharpton lifted up, has ended the consent decrees in Minneapolis. And let's be clear about what we mean by this. Consent decrees are the means by which the Justice Department helps police departments suspend and end police homicides and violence. And we have these consent decrees being ended. We have companies like Target and others who are ending their commitments to diversity. And we have an administration in the White House that has literally declared not a war on racism, but declared a war on Black people. And so 5 years later, we are in a very difficult place. Last point here, 5 years ago, you had more than 50% of Americans saying that they thought that those protests then would lead to change. 5 years later, 70+% are pessimistic about the possibilities of change. And so what that means is change has not happened. We have to be more determined to bring it about. And we have to inspire people to make the kind of systematic change that we need to make in this country in order to be the country we claim to be.
How gargantuan is that task, Professor, when, as you rightly point out, there is a current administration that by many expert interpretation is not an advocate for the type of justice that you and your colleagues would like to see, that many who are involved in the Black Lives Matter would like to see. It's not at the top of their agenda. In fact, they don't see a problem at all, many would argue. So if that is the parameter and that is the broad scope under which you are working, a president and an administration in Washington, that's very top heavy also, getting involved at what's happening at the state level and at the municipal and city level, how do you move forward with development of new legislation and trying to really push perhaps a more progressive agenda?
Sure. So that's a good question and a hard question, and a question that is best answered with honesty and history. And here's what I mean. If we go back to simply the civil rights movement, where we had millions and millions of Black people in this country who were entitled to vote but could not vote, where we had people being lynched routinely and daily, near daily in this country, all across America. A moment in American history where Black people were literally riding in the back of the bus and being relegated to the back of society. In less than 10 years, we passed the Civil Rights Act, the Fair Housing Act, the Fair Employment Act, the Voting Rights Act. We made changes in this country that have affected countries around the world. The civil rights laws in the 1960s changed the immigration laws that had literally made it possible for the country that America is today to be what it is today. What can we learn from that? What we can learn from that is when you put thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people in the streets and in the legislatures, and when you take determined action in the courts, and when you frankly refuse to give up, right? So in other words, I want to be very, very clear here. Many people risk their lives in order to protect the lives of others. And so we cannot depend on the polls, we cannot depend on the popularity of an American president to determine our progress with respect to how do we make America better. And so yes, are the circumstances difficult? Most certainly. Are the odds long? Most certainly. But if we read history well, all we need to do is look within ourselves and know that we have the determination, we have the resolve, we have the ability to literally change history in the present for the future.
Professor Brooks, if you'll allow me this indulgence, I, like many Canadians and Americans, tend to binge watch shows. And I recently binge watched a show called 7 Seconds. And it was, if you're familiar with it, essentially this, a 15-year-old black boy hit and run by a white police officer. It was the crime and the cover-up by the police. And of course, this is a piece of fiction, but it felt eerily real. If you think about George Floyd, and we're thinking about Tamir Rice, and we're thinking about all young black boys and black girls and men and women and what they deal with regularly, and the show came down to the value of a black body. Would you leave a white body in the ditch in a snow? And overwhelmingly the response was no. But when it was, would you leave a little black boy's body in a ditch to die? The answer was different. And I know it's really getting down to the crux of it, the value of a human body, but this is what it is. Are we evolved enough as a society here in North America, and I'll put Canada and the United States in the same scope, do we value the black individual enough, or do we still see black people, and I'm speaking as a woman of color, as the other?
You know, you could not have stated that more precisely and the question more brilliantly. And here's what I mean. I'll answer it succinctly and at length. We value black lives, brown lives, indigenous lives less, but we have the capacity to value them more. All the studies show that when people look at black and brown and indigenous children, they tend to think of those children as literally being more likely to be criminal, more likely to be venal, more likely to be older, and so we mistreat them. We don't take care of them. When we see black, brown, and indigenous women in hospitals, we don't take care of them the same. But we need to be very clear about this. We have within ourselves the capacity to bring about change. How do we know this? We know this because there have been improvements with respect to, let me give you one concrete example. In this country, we have reduced in the United States by over 80% juvenile incarceration, many of those children being black and brown and indigenous children over the last 20 years, much of that in the last 10. Think about that, an 80+% decrease in incarceration. How did we do it? We did it by studying the problem. We did it by putting people in the streets. We did it by putting lawyers in the courts. We did it by simply doing what we do so well in Canada and in the United States. Make up your mind, work exceedingly hard, bring people together, focus, and don't accept anything less than success. It can be done, and we've done it before.
Professor Brooks, before I let you go, when you and I were speaking quite regularly 5 years back, I would often ask you about your sons. I know you have 2 sons. And, and I just wonder, your boys are 5 years older, and President Trump is back in the White House, and it is still America, and we're still fighting the same struggles as a society, dealing with very complicated race relations. And I wonder now, 5 years on, your hopes and your concerns, your fears for your boys.
Yeah, well, I remain concerned because I, as a professor, middle-aged professor, I've been pulled over by the police maybe 25 times or so. with no tickets, simply because I was black and in the wrong place. My sons have experienced the same kind of treatment, but I have one in medical school. I have one heading off to law school and graduate school, and I'm afraid for them every day, but I dream for them every day. And I dream for other sons and daughters and children all across this country and Canada too. And so my point being here is we have to be not fearful, but appropriately apprehensive, but we also must dream and choose to be brave for our children. And so I'm glad you asked about my sons. I'm determined to be a good dad, a good father, but I want to be a good dad, good father, and as a consequence, be a better citizen and work exceedingly hard to protect everybody's children, because that's where we all are. Nobody wants to see any kid in the ditch, any kid in the back of a police cruiser, or anyone at the end of a police revolver who shouldn't be there. And we can do it.
Professor Cornell Brooks, such a pleasure to speak with you again, sir. And congratulations to your boys. I hope they're doing really well. They're young men now. Congratulations to them, and wishing you and them nothing but success. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll tell them that.
Please do.